Sister Nancy Brown, who visited our diocese a while ago at a clergy study day on the issue of safeguarding and sexual abuse, said the following: "The body of Christ has been broken by the scandal of clerical abuse. All members of the community have been affected by this grave injustice. During this time of intense pain and shame, all are called to show compassionate care, listening deeply to the pain, shame, and anger, confusion, disbelief, and questioning of faith. It is a time to listen unconditionally without judgment, rejecting all cover-ups, revealing all secrets, calling perpetrators to accountability, and walking with survivors." To any person in our diocese or beyond who has experienced abuse by clergy or anyone else in the Church, I again express my profound sorrow, and I apologize for what you have suffered and for the betrayal, violation, and abandonment you have experienced. I also apologize to all our Church whose faith and trust has been damaged because of the sinful actions of those who abuse the innocent and those who covered up such abuse. I recognize both individual and institutional change must happen in our Church to move forward. In March 2020, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Saskatoon provided a safeguarding action plan titled Safer Church, Stronger Communities. The key goal of our plan was that our diocese and our churches be places of profound respect and safety for all peoples, especially the young and vulnerable. Following upon the commitments made in March of last year, a historical case review process was launched. I am now providing a report that is the result of the work done by the Historical Case Review Committee, and I am also updating the Safer Church, Stronger Communities Safeguarding Action Plan as a result of the work and recommendations of the Policy and Operations Review Committee. These committees worked very hard over the last many months and featured the generous offering of expertise and time by lay professionals who represent various proficiencies and experiences required for the review processes. They also worked independently of my office in order to provide an objective and unbiased review and set of recommendations. On behalf of the Diocese of Saskatoon, I express my tremendous gratitude and appreciation for their work. This work is extremely important and valued. Although we have come a long way in our efforts, there is much more to do. I am grateful for the very focused and specific guidance related to our 20 commitments that fall under our 4 pillars. Number 1, outreach and healing. Number 2, process of reporting and addressing allegations. Number 3, policies and training. And number 4, expanding safeguarding culture. I am also grateful for the report of the Historical Case Review Committee, which examined historical cases involving serious misconduct reported over the years in the Diocese of Saskatoon. The committee found 9 cases involving serious misconduct by persons in the service of the Church within the Roman Catholic Diocese of Saskatoon. In addition, the report references 2 non-historical cases that are still under review. To any person in our diocese or beyond who has experienced abuse by clergy or anyone else in the Church, I again express my profound sorrow, and I apologize for what you have suffered and for the betrayal, violation, and any abandonment you have experienced. I also apologize to all of our Church whose faith and trust has been damaged because of the sinful actions of those who abuse the innocent and those who covered up such abuse. Words must be accompanied by substantial actions, and trust must be earned, not merely granted. It is my earnest commitment that this stage of developing our safeguarding action plan demonstrates that we are holding the bar very high in assuring that all our churches are safe and respectful communities. I conclude by asking you to join me in praying that the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph will be our guide and encouragement as we continue to strive for holiness and build a culture that assures safety, respect, and support for all of our people, especially the young and all vulnerable persons. And may the Lord bless us in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
As a result of Safer Churches, Stronger Communities Safeguarding Action Plan, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Saskatoon undertook a review of historical cases involving serious misconduct reported. The Historical Case Review Committee consisted of a diverse group of women and men from varied backgrounds. I have a background in policing, having retired after more than 30 years. The group also included a victim of abuse, a retired prosecutor, a professional counselor, among other areas of expertise brought to the table. Thank you to each of the committee members for all that you brought to the table. I was asked to chair this group, who gave selflessly of their time and talent to work towards a safer environment in our churches, especially for the most vulnerable. There was careful deliberation and prayerful reflection required in making recommendations to fulfill our mandate. Our mandate was to conduct a review of cases involving the abuse of children and vulnerable adults by persons in service of the church, and to assess the effectiveness, identify gaps, and make recommendations for improvements of the diocesan policies, practices, and procedures. The focus of the review committee was the protection of minors and vulnerable adults. We only reviewed cases which had been concluded. That is, all investigative avenues have been pursued. A concluded file may have included criminal charges, internal discipline by the bishops, such as the removal of a priest from public ministry, or the file may have been concluded due to insufficient evidence. The file may also have been concluded if the complaint was determined to be unsubstantiated. In some cases, due to the passage of time, there were very few sources of information available. For instance, witnesses or subjects may have died. Of the concluded files that exist, where allegations of sexual abuse or serious misconduct were made to the Diocese of Saskatoon, there were 9 cases involving alleged serious misconduct by persons in service of the Church within the Roman Catholic Diocese of Saskatoon. The summary also includes 2 additional disclosed cases not examined by the Historical Case Review Committee, but included to meet commitment number 12 of the Safer Church, Stronger Communities Safeguarding Action Plan. A more detailed case-by-case analysis may be found on the diocesan website.
The historical review process has been a major effort involving 2 committees that included lay professionals from a diverse backgrounds, in fact, all walks of life. After many hours of reflection and discussion, our final report has been released to parishes and posted on our diocesan website. In addition to the bishop's letter and apology, the final report posted includes updates to our Safeguarding Action Plan, Safer Church, Stronger Communities, and a number of frequently asked questions, which we'll also be addressing in this video. Both the Historical Case Review Committee and the Policy and Operations Review Committee have worked and wrestled extensively with striking an appropriate balance between sensitivity and responsibility and accountability and transparency. Each member of these committees deeply desires to ensure that the evil of sexual abuse, in fact all types of abuse, is eradicated in our church and in our communities at large. In particular, in meeting with victims or survivors of sexual abuse, the Policy and Operation Committee repeatedly found that remaining victim-focused must be reflected in every update to our safeguarding plan and must be a part of all aspects of our church. For some, releasing names of perpetrators of sexual abuse may have tremendous potential to empower victims to seek healing and reparation. For others, there is a great fear and real risk of further trauma with the release of names. As with our commitment that our entire safeguarding action plan be more victim or survivor focused, we came to realize that with regard to this question of releasing names of abusers, we must prioritize the needs and desires of the victim or survivor. Therefore, we have added this important clause to Commitment 12, addressing the release of names of abusers. It reads, "We commit to careful consultations with victims or representatives of victims prior to the public identification of names." I know some may interpret this revision to our commitment to be yet another self-protective mechanism or excuse, and I admit we have not yet earned the right to a different interpretation. But it is our belief that the Church's concern for its own reputation over concern for the well-being of persons involved in our church has been a great source of evil and pain and cannot continue. Let's move forward together in a spirit of compassion, care, and love for each other as we work to make our church a safe place for all.
Why has it taken the Catholic Church so long to address the issue of sexual abuse by priests?
The Roman Catholic Diocese of Saskatoon and the Catholic dioceses throughout Canada have worked steadily over the last 30 years to develop and implement policies to protect young people. Even one case of abuse is too many. In Saskatoon, we recognize we have made mistakes in the past, and recent revelations about the extent of the problem elsewhere in the world have made us resolve to intensify our efforts to protect more forcefully, to respond more effectively, and to promote healing. The work of the Safeguarding Committee, and more recently the Historic Case Review Committee and the Policy and Operations Committee, have been important and significant developments in our diocese over the last 3 years.
Why are numbers so low in Saskatoon compared to Vancouver and larger American dioceses such as New York and Philadelphia or other jurisdictions in the U.S.?
Every local diocese has its own history of leadership and some distinct local laws and values. Saskatoon is a much smaller diocese and with a shorter history. The Diocese of Saskatoon has about 95,000 Catholics. Vancouver has about 443,000 Catholics. New York, 2.6 million Catholics. It is also possible that some victims or survivors may have not come forward because of fear. We want all victims, survivors, to know that there are policies in place to protect them. If they wish to come forward, they will be heard and treated with respect.
Did the Historical Case Review Committee look at everything?
Yes, we reviewed every file relating to serious misconduct and sexual abuse.
Are there priests who have been found guilty of sexual abuse or sexual assault still working in ministry in Saskatoon?
No.
What happens to priests when they're removed from ministry?
Church law has changed in the past decade to allow them to be much more readily removed from the clerical state or defrocked. In cases where that change is not possible, a priest removed from ministry can be given strict restrictions. For example, no contact with children, no access to social media, no right to wear clerical garb, no right to say Mass.
Are there any priests who have not been charged or convicted, but who the diocese strongly suspects of having abused others, whether children or adults, who are currently ministering in other dioceses?
No.
Once a priest and or lay employee has been accused, what happens?
A priest who has been accused is placed on leave immediately, and if the complaints involve children, police are notified immediately. As well, complainants are offered counseling by a qualified third-party counselor. That may be a psychologist, a social worker, or a clinical counselor, and those services are provided at the expense of the diocese. Before 2019, the protocol for the review of accusations involved priests delegated by the bishop for the purpose of investigating complaints. In 2019, and confirmed in the Safeguarding Action Plan released in March 2020, a new policy was introduced whereby laypersons are assigned to this task. If a priest or lay employee is found to have committed a criminal offense, responsibility for pursuing charges naturally lies with the public justice system. If the individual is charged and ultimately found guilty, he or she will be removed from ministry. In the case of a priest, he will also be given strict restrictions. If the offense is not criminal in nature, but has been damaging and hurtful to the complainant, the independent investigator will recommend to the bishop whether the conduct merits removal from or restriction in ministry or work in the diocese.
Why can't the diocese readily release names and files of all clergy or church employee abusers?
Saskatchewan has no specific privacy legislation for organizations operating in the private sector. Instead, they rely on the federal Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, or PIPEDA, which applies to the private sector. Defamation laws throughout Canada and the US are also applied differently. Publicized reports from the US over the last few years operate within the context of the related legislation within their states. Many observers note that websites such as the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, or SNAP, publish names of the probably guilty and wonder why our diocese cannot. This is because these third-party organizations are not an employer of these priests or employees, and thus privacy legislation does not apply to them.
Were religious orders who historically worked with the diocese included in the historical case review?
If there were cases of serious misconduct that related to religious clergy assigned to working in our diocese, and these were in our diocesan files, then yes, they were reviewed. However, the scope of the historical case review did not involve reviewing historical records held by other religious orders.
Do victims have to sign confidentiality agreements, or are they prevented in any way from speaking openly if they wish to?
Yes, they can speak openly. The last time a confidentiality agreement was signed was in the early 1990s. Such agreements have not been used in almost 30 years, and in fact, the diocese has waived any agreements that were previously signed. However, the diocese does respect and will take into consideration the wishes of victims and survivors with respect to non-disclosure.
Will the new victim support process be run by professionals trained in the area?
Yes, the Victim Survivor Support Service will be staffed by on-call professionals with certification in fields such as psychology, clinical counseling, and registered social work.
What has the diocese learned about being victim or survivor focused?
Throughout this process, we have learned so much. We have learned a great deal about the meaning of being victim and survivor focused. And we know that there is still so much more to learn. One of our commitments is to move from working for victims to working with victims. We are also learning that victims or survivors have a great variety of circumstances and desires in terms of how they are supported. Whether abusers are publicly named, the weighing of transparency versus the need for confidentiality, and ways in which re-traumatization of victims occurs. This commitment to being victim or survivor focused is probably the most important and challenging commitment that our diocese is undertaking. Listening to and journeying with victims is part of our new way of working with victims.
How can victims be assured that these promised changes will actually take effect?
The current response includes deadlines as a sign of how very seriously the bishop and all of his co-workers take to our safeguarding action plan. Commitment 14 speaks to ongoing auditing of the diocese policies and protocols relating to safeguarding. These audits will be done by an external auditor at 4-year intervals. In addition to that, for each of the commitments, we are developing work plans which will ensure timely implementation of all the commitments made in the plan.
If someone is a victim and hasn't reported the incident, what can they do?
Well, firstly, please know that the Diocese of Saskatoon is committed to listening to victims or survivors and to responding quickly and compassionately. We invite anyone who has not reported abuse to come forward if they wish to share their story or their complaint with the diocese. If a crime was committed, we always encourage people to contact the police. Contact information for reporting abuse to the diocese is on our website. As of spring 2020, a new service was implemented in the diocese, and it features designated intake officers who receive any complaints. During and following the investigation process, either by the diocese or by the police, a victim support coordinator provides initial and ongoing support and information to the complainant. In the case of a complaint or allegation received by the intake officer, and if the complaint is determined not criminal, the complaint is forwarded to an investigator who conducts his or her investigation, independent of the bishop's office. These investigators are trained in investigative processes and are lay individuals. The findings of the investigator are then communicated to the bishop, who then brings the investigator's report to the Safeguarding Committee Chair or representative, the Director of Safeguarding, and the College of Consultors. The bishop then makes a decision about acceptance of the investigator's findings following receipt of input and discernment from those that I just mentioned. The protocol for investigation of allegations of serious misconduct, including sexual abuse, is on our website.
Why was the abuse reported in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission not addressed by this committee?
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission did years of thorough collaborative work. The Roman Catholic Diocese of Saskatoon did not run any residential schools, nor were there any residential schools located in our diocese, and therefore they're not a part of our history and records. A summary of the related report from the TRC can be found on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission website.